Welcome back to this Forge College Explainer. Have you ever tried assembling flat-pack furniture without the instruction manual? Yeah, it's pretty much a nightmare. You usually end up with a wobbly table and, 5 leftover screws. Well, building a mental model of Web3 without a clear map is kind of the exact same experience. In our previous lesson, we gathered our raw materials by curating official documentation and community anchors. Today, we're taking those materials and actually sketching out the architectural blueprint. We are diving into our draft diagram.
Okay, let's take a quick look at our floor plan for today. We'll cover the architectural blueprint, mapping the 5 zones, moving the furniture in, contrasts and visual legends, making room for Bitcoin, and we will wrap it all up with the final blueprint inspection.
Section 1. The architectural blueprint, from raw materials to floor plan.
Look, a good architect wouldn't dream of building a skyscraper without sketching it first, right? So we need to strategically organize your raw components. And hey, don't let the blank page freak you out. We are drafting with a strict engineering mindset here. Picture this, minimalist orange and dark green ink right on textured beige paper. That's the vibe. We are prioritizing pure clarity and functional layout way over some polished masterpiece. You absolutely don't need to be an artist, you just need to test if the spatial layout actually works.
Section 2. Mapping the 5 zones, drawing the rooms.
Let's start by laying down the load-bearing walls of our blockchain house. Without defining these 5 specific zones, our components would literally just be a messy pile on the floor. Now, what's super clever here is how arranging these from top left to bottom right naturally mimics the life cycle of a transaction. You start up in the networking layer where messages gossip, then you move into the transaction flow and pool, drop down into execution and the EVM entry, slide on over to state storage, and finally hit that consensus interface. The visual flow just makes perfect sense.
Section 3. Moving the furniture in, placing Ethereum's components.
All right, our walls are up, so it's time to move the furniture in. Inside the networking room, we drop in our gossip arrows. Down in the transaction flow room, our pending transactions take a seat. Execution gets the EVM entry points, state storage gets those neat state trie sketches, and consensus gets the finalization hooks. By grouping and nesting these elements together, we're showing exactly how the transaction pool naturally feeds directly into the execution zone.
Section 4. Contrasts and visual legends, the master key.
A blueprint is pretty much useless if you can't read the symbols. Imagine mistaking a solid brick wall for a door. Ouch. To avoid that, we use what's called a prioritized contrast. We take a specific visual device, like say a bold dark green callout, to literally show rather than just tell the differences. It's how we clearly highlight complex contrasts, like Ethereum's heavy statefulness versus Bitcoin's UTXO simplicity. It instantly takes a highly technical concept and makes it totally understandable.
A smart, compact legend allows anyone reviewing your draft to interpret the whole thing without needing a 20-page manual. Since we're using a restricted architectural palette, we gotta be clever. So, dark green ink, that represents persistent state and borders. Orange ink highlights execution and active network flow. A dashed line means we're dealing with an asynchronous process, while a solid line is synchronous. Boom! It's a simple, incredibly elegant visual vocabulary that keeps the cognitive load nice and low.
Section 5. Making room for Bitcoin, the minimalist roommate.
So, our Ethereum floor plan is fully furnished and looking great, but we have to tape off a section of the apartment for our incoming kind of minimalist roommate, Bitcoin. We do this by creating a placeholder. Basically, you're drawing a reserved, proportionally sized empty box and explicitly saying, hey, something important goes here later. Reserving this space deliberately right now ensures that our final visual balance stays perfectly intact.
Think about how this builds our contrast right from the very beginning of the drafting phase. On one hand, you've got this highly detailed, densely populated Ethereum layout, and it sits directly opposite a stark, blank reserve space labeled for the UTXO ledger. That sheer difference in visual weight tells a massive architectural story before we've even drawn a single Bitcoin component. It perfectly sets the stage.
Section 6. The final blueprint inspection, passing the building code.
Before we put our drafting pens down for the day, we absolutely have to pass inspection so the roof doesn't cave in on us. You need to verify these 5 criteria one by one. Are all your components actually represented? Are those visual contrasts clearly defined? Is the legend itself easy to read? Are your placeholders properly sized? And finally, does the eye naturally follow the transaction lifecycle from start to finish?
Now, here is the ultimate test for your draft. Hand it over to a peer and ask them,
Spend 90 seconds looking at the diagram. Without any prior context, can you list the primary components? If their answers don't match your intentions, actually scratch that. If they think the transaction pool is a consensus mechanism, for example, then that right there is exactly where your blueprint needs iteration.
In our next lesson, we are going to finalize this diagram and finally replace those blank placeholders with concrete Bitcoin counterparts. But leave yourself with this thought. How will Bitcoin's purest simplicity visually challenge Ethereum's massive complexity on the exact same piece of paper? We'll find out next time. Until then, make sure to visit forge.college to explore more Web3 concepts, access the full Ethereum fundamentals track, and keep deepening your understanding. This explainer was proudly brought to you by Forge College. Thanks so much for drafting this blueprint with me today, and keep exploring.